Well, we're continuing our conversation, learning more about the carbon market and learning more about Agoro Carbon Alliance. Joining us here today, Jerry Stevens, Regional Manager with Agoro Carbon Alliance. Jerry, great to catch up with you, sir. I hope you're doing well.
Jesse, spring is here. It's always a great time of year, and appreciate the conversation today.
Well, thanks for jumping in and talking with us here today, Jerry. We're talking more on the range and pasture side of what Agoro has to offer. So far, we've been learning about the nuts and bolts of the company and learning about the carbon contracts that you guys do. And of course, with Agoro, you were one of the first companies generating carbon credits with ranchers. So talk just a little bit about that before we get into some of the nuts and bolts of the range and pasture side.
Absolutely. Well, I'm blessed. I live in the Northern Plains, and there's a lot of folks out here that have range and pasture ground. And we have lots of ranchers out in this part of the world that do a great job of managing forages. And actually, range and pasture land is one of the best carbon capture, best carbon sinks that are available for us.
Well, and thinking about especially your neck of the woods through the Dakotas, I know we had the drought issues here recently, trying to rebuild a lot of that range and pasture land in the western half of the U.S., essentially, in the plain states out towards the Rockies, et cetera. So, what is your take on just how the state of our range and pasture land, the last couple of years, how is it doing? And in turn, how is that working together with, bringing new ranchers into the fold here under Agoro's carbon plans that you guys have in your contracts that you have, Jerry?
Absolutely. The Mountain West, I cover clear out to the PNW. We have a few new folks we added out there, but over the last couple of years, I spent a lot of time from basically South Dakota clear to the West Coast. And we've been in a 3-year drought. And a lot of this rangeland has been, degraded. It's not necessarily because of overuse, but just because of the drought. And also areas like in Montana, we've had severe grasshopper infestations. So it has a lot of times it has nothing to do with even livestock being on the ground. But the nice thing about it is most of this ground is really primed for recovery. It's a miracle out there when you get an inch of rain, or they've had a lot of snow and a lot of moisture this year. And now we have some heat, it's really going to green up nice. And Mother Nature just has a wonderful way of regenerating these grasslands and these pasture acres. So we're really looking forward to that. I think that one of the misconceptions is that the carbon all goes away when it's a drought. And actually, the microbes in the soil are really what are going to cycle and produce and capture that carbon and hold it in the soil for us. And actually, they've just kind of been stagnant. So all they're kind of primed and ready to go. If you can think about it's a racehorse that's been in the paddock and it's ready to go. So a little bit of moisture, we can really prime these systems.
Well, Jerry, you said a word in there, misconceptions. And I think not only is there the misconception about carbon being lost during a drought, but I think there's still a lot of, I don't know if misconception is the right word, but a lot of folks are still learning more and more about the carbon markets. So let's talk a little bit about the range and pasture offerings that Agoro has to offer our ranchers. Can you walk us through some of the things and maybe, dispel some of those misconceptions that are out there, Jerry?
Yes, I'd be glad to do that. So one of the amazing things about this project is the practices we ask people to implement a new level, additional management practice on. They come down to 3 of them basically in our project. One of them is improved grazing. And that could be everything from folks that are doing fencing and water projects, because as you do that, obviously you're going to impact your forage usage and how you move those animals across your ranch and across those pastures. But if you already have that, it could be just how you manage them, how many days on pasture you put the cattle out there or sheep. It could be the pattern at which you're eating early season grasses this year. Next year, we're going to rotate. We're going to eat that pasture late, graze it late, if you will. So there's all sorts of options. And the nice thing about our project is in range and pasture, we can really customize and figure out a set of practices that work for each individual producer. So it's not a cookie cutter point system, if you will. It's more about let's figure out what improved grazing means on your ranch, okay, in your property, and we can work with folks and really develop a custom plan. The other 2 are biodiversity, and what has to do with is seeding additional species. We talked a little bit about the microbes, and people usually glaze over with microbes and when you start talking the soil, but a lot of what we're doing above the ground really is to support that microbiome, that soil health, if you will. And anytime you can get an additional or new type of root in the soil, again, it will help prime and increase the activity of the microbes in the soil. They live off exudates and the roots and the carbohydrates that come from those roots in the soil. So anything we can do to feed them better works well. The third practice has to do with nitrogen efficiency. And where it's practical and where it makes sense is to use low rates of nitrogen. In my area, it's going to be less than 20 units of nitrogen, about 8 to 12 pounds units, if you will. And all you're trying to do is just prime the system. So again, anytime you can get growth on top of the ground, we put a little bit of nitrogen there, we get a little bump in growth. We're also getting growth, additional growth underground with the roots. And that's helping to prime that microbial system. So it's funny that we work with everything on top of the ground, but we're really supporting this kind of system we've ignored a lot of my ag career underground.
Well, and I think another key to this puzzle as well, Jerry, especially with Agoro, is the fact that looking at all these different practices and the contracts that, say, a rancher enters with Agoro, 10-year contracts you guys do, and you guys don't just sign it and walk away. You walk with the folks that are coming to you and signing a contract throughout that 10-year period, answering questions, helping them achieve these practices on their operation. You guys really work side by side with your farmers and ranchers, don't you?
Well, we do, and I think that one of the terms I like to use is, I'm looking for partners, because this isn't a box. This isn't something where you can just kind of check the box or go through the motions, because we're going to take a soil sample in year 1 and come back in year 5 and in year 10 and take samples. So it's a pay for performance program. So I need to find folks that are really serious about improving their forage base on their operation, their forage quantity or quality, and really to help manage their livestock better across their forage base. And usually if I can find those kind of partners, number one, those are the folks I'm looking to get involved in. We work on with contracts.
Well, Jerry, and another thing too, we think about range and pasture land, and I think a lot of times folks immediately think, okay, the plain states and out towards the Rocky Mountains, et cetera. But if I'm a rancher in Pennsylvania, Ohio, somewhere else, and I have pasture land, whether it's big or small, this is something that could be for you. It's not just limited to one area of the country either, Jerry.
Absolutely. I'm proud to be in the Northern Plains, but this project is a lot larger than just where I live in the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming. So a great example of this is we tend to be limited, not in a bad way, but there's kind of a natural cap on the carbon sequestration in the Northern Plains because of colder weather and lack of moisture, right? But the contracts are still very viable contracts in this part of the world. But if you start getting south, you get into Missouri, if you get into Louisiana, Georgia, pick a state where you have more moisture and warmer conditions, actually the sequestration rates can be almost double what they are here in the Dakotas. So there are opportunities all over the United States, and we're signing contracts with folks all over the United States. And actually, the sequestration rates and the financial opportunity on a per acre basis, if it's wetter and warmer, actually it's even a more viable contract for those folks.
Well, Jerry, great thoughts. Before we wrap it up and let you go, anything else you want to mention for our range and pasture land customers, potentially for Agoro and those partners that you talked about, possibly bringing into the fold? What would you want to say to them?
Well, I think people tend to disqualify themselves way too easily. And what, for an example, is any new practice you implemented, some fencing or water projects in the last 12 months, they would count as a new practice in our project. Okay. So number one, don't self-disqualify yourself. Get a hold of one of the folks at Agoro Carbon, one of the agronomists, one of the folks like myself that work with the contracts, and talk about what your goals are and what your plans are in your operation. The nice thing about our project with these contracts is we can really customize the practices to their operation. So I would encourage them to talk to somebody in the company, find out where your plans fit, and if they fit in with these carbon projects we have right now, that would be great. The other nice thing about our project is that we don't sell anything. We're input agnostic. So I don't sell any fertilizer, I don't sell seed, I don't sell biologicals, and so all we do is carbon. So I've been an agronomist for quite a long time and really have enjoyed that career in providing inputs to producers. But actually what I do now is I write checks to producers. We work with producers on creating a revenue stream for their farm and ranch. And it's quite a privilege. I enjoy it every day.
Well, Jerry, we appreciate the time and knowledge. I know folks can learn more, agorocarbonalliance.com or agorocarbon.com. It'll get you there as well. And of course, again, we appreciate the time. Look forward to catching up with you again in the future. Jerry, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Have a good day, Jesse.